Today on Near Mint Condition, we're going to talk about SEGA Genesis games and blast processing and Genesis does what Nintendon't.
Gotta go fast.
I could just do this over and over. The whole episode is just going to be me flicking the switch.
That's what happened to your first wife, right?
That's fine.
All right, yeah. So that sound brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah. So in case it
good memories.
In case it wasn't very obvious, I want to talk about the SEGA Genesis, which is kind of a stretch for me because I'm a Nintendo fanboy, but I have a lot of Genesis games.
Well, that's because Genesis was the best system to buy.
Yeah, I figured you would be all over this
Genesis
episode.
Genesis does what Nintendon't.
Oh.
But you know what?
Before we get into any of this, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious
This is
about
definitely a human centipede of like SEGA Genesis.
It's bad enough that you have the Game Genie, which, I mean, come on. I question your honor. But what is all this?
Okay. So, Sonic Mania was released for the PlayStation 4, Xbox, and Switch, right? Which is the thing that you were just playing. Fantastic game. You should check it out. We should do a whole episode on Sonic. Just to see how ridiculous I can do. I have a Game Genie. I have multiple copies of Sonic and Knuckles. I don't know why I'm multiple. But I put this on top. I took the picture because the Sega CD stacks, the Genesis, the 32X,
Game Genie, so forth.
Take the picture. Boom, it's funny. Some dude on Twitter was like, hey, what happens if you turn that on? I'm like, I didn't turn this on. You know how long it would take? So I went and spent 20 minutes getting all the power supplies and plugging everything together to turn it on, and sure enough, this game comes on with Knuckles the Echidna in it. So really? It actually does work. Like, it starts with the Game Genie.
Did you shut down the Pentagon?
So then can you, like, put Mike Tyson in it or some sort of Game Genie bullshit?
Even though I'm a Nintendo fanboy, I want to talk about the Genesis because it was an awesome system, had a lot of great games, a lot of cool things that we treasure came from this system.
Yeah, speaking of treasure, Quackshot. I love Quackshot. Not a treasure game. Not a treasure game.
No, not a treasure game.
So you guys all know my love of Uncle Scrooge, and this game doesn't feature Uncle Scrooge, but
we should never
it is definitely inspired by Uncle Scrooge because Donald Duck picks up one of Uncle Scrooge's journals, and he's like, oh, he's a treasure hunter, cool. So he takes Huey, Dewey, and Louie on this adventure hunting for treasure. And it's an awesome side-scroller where you're shooting plungers and, like, and you're jumping on plungers.
As you do.
It's a great side-scroller. I could have gone with plenty of side-scrollers like Decap Attack and Decap Attack.
Well, I will say,
Vector Man, whatever, dude. Quackshot, that's where it's at.
I will say, so in the same vein of Quackshot, like, the Genesis had enough graphic fidelity to accurately represent what cartoon characters look like Mickey Mouse Castle of Illusions that look great, actually look like Mickey Mouse with animation stuff. So Quackshot is also in the same vein. It actually looked like the character it was representing was cool.
All right, so was...
Can't believe you kicked off a Quackshot.
All right. So
it's not bad as, like, Bart's Nightmare.
Bart's Nightmare.
Bart's Nightmare?
That's how we're going to kick this episode off.
That's right.
By the way, it's also on the Sega Genesis.
I'm going to go with the Sonic franchise, but specifically Sonic 2.
I agree with that.
Sonic 2 for a number of reasons. One, Sonic the Hedgehog, the original, seems like it was as much about proof of concept as anything else. Sonic 2, though, where you get the spin boost and the bonus stage is no longer like brain destroying.
Yes. So rotating is like the tunnel.
Yeah, it's like the
balls.
Yep. Thing and Tails, who, despite the fact that everything I've ever read says they are exactly the same speed, always seems slower.
Yep. And jets things up.
Yeah.
And he can fly.
But I love the Sonic games. They hold a special place in my heart. And the thing is, where Sega is no longer producing systems and they're just, pimping out the characters.
In giant statues.
Big giant statues.
Yeah, well, so like I got the Genesis ROM thing for the Xbox and everything, and playing on that, it's just not the same.
When I was 12 years old, I got a Genesis for my birthday, and the game that I wanted, which, you buy the Genesis for Sonic, but not this kid. because I like Bart's Nightmare, but no, it wasn't Bart's Nightmare. It was
Altered
X-Men.
Beast.
No, it was X-Men, which was
Really? X-Men.
X-Men.
Which one?
the first one. I know it wasn't Clone Wars. It was
Everybody loves Clone Wars.
Everyone
That's
loves
the
Clone
one
Wars.
that-
That's the one everyone wants to talk about. So I'm going to pull another Bart's Nightmare and say the first one.
No, it's fine because right around that same timeline, there's a Spider-Man game, there's that Batman game, the X-Men game. Yes,
Well, this is like '93, so I mean that's when the animated flick
Was that done by
coming out.
Acclaim? Is that who did that one?
I don't
Because I
know.
know they own the rights to a lot of the side scrollers, at least on the Super Nintendo.
the X-Men on the Genesis was Sega.
And you could play with the characters that you know and love. Like you could play with Gambit, you could play with Nightcrawler, you could play with
Yeah.
Storm. I mean, Cyclops for Dan there.
Only Dan.
Anybody but Cyclops.
He did have quite a reach.
Yeah, he did. And I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and then you had your Mojo stage. So there were characters that you didn't necessarily see first off in the animation, but you saw in the comics.
When I got this Genesis, I'm a kid. Oh my god, I opened the Genesis, I played Ultra Beast, and I was like, Mom, Santa Claus sucks. Brought me this horrible system. So my parents felt bad, and they bought me Golden
I
Axe, which is
loved X-Men.
get out. No, they didn't buy me X-Men. So they bought me Golden Axe, which is a great game. But it brings me to the game I want to talk about, Strider. That is not Strider King Breed.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Strider.
Strider. So Strider is one of these games.
Close to the arcade.
Unlike Strider on the Nintendo, the NES, this one is a pretty daggone good copy of the arcade. Again, 16-bit power. We actually have a pretty good reproduction of the arcade experience. 8 mega memory, 8 megabits. It was the first game, like, full stop, there's a cartridge that had 8 megabits of memory. Well, so it cost like $70-some, and convincing my cheap parents to buy this game was an act upon itself. But it was arcade, almost arcade perfect, great action, fast, good music. It's one of Capcom's defining action-adventure games.
Streets of Rage 2. I love Streets of Rage 2.
Not Streets of Rage 1.
No, the music in this game and the fact that you can choose from, 4 characters, right?
Yeah, 4
Instead
dudes.
of just 3.
4 dudes.
And there was a little black dude on roller skates and a chick, and it was different.
Yeah,
a lot different. Just in case you can't see, because Rob's massive.
So this is called the
Fucking
Stack,
games.
Sega Stack.
But yeah, no, this game was a lot of fun. I love the graphics, I love the music, I love the level designs for each. Each different boss had a different kind of level and definitely felt like it, unlike the first Streets of Rage, which almost seemed like a little bit of copy and paste from, especially when you get towards the later levels.
Yeah, so this game, Streets of Rage 1 and 2, they was playing off the fact that Nintendo and Capcom released Final Fight, and Final Fight you could not do 2 people at the same
Couldn't
time.
tell. That was completely sarcasm, by the way. Yeah.
Hate you so much.
But the
reason.
But unlike Final Fight 2, Streets of Rage 2 was awesome.
Yeah, so that was the thing. Like, the Super Nintendo had Final Fight, and you can only do a 1-person game. This, you could do 2 people playing at the same time, and Sega was like, psh, we don't need your Final Fight. We can do Streets of Rage 2 with 2 people playing at the same time, with Yuzo Koshiro's amazing soundtrack in the background. So, like, these games were legit.
Yeah. Well, until Final Fight Guy came in, and then they're like, look,
Look,
now you
finally,
can play
now
two
we
guys
can play
and
2 guys.
So speaking of fighting games, my next pick is ToeJam and Earl.
ToeJam and Earl. Jam.
That had some dope music.
ToeJam and Earl, which is the greatest Genesis game in the history of all games.
What?
Well,
Have you gone back and played it? Because
Have you
I
played Quackshot?
loaded it back on the PlayStation Network, and I've
No, it's a
frustrated
solid
on
game,
Earl.
though.
More so than any other Genesis game, was like just whiling away hours.
Right.
Just doo doo doo. Yeah.
That song.
And it like, I mean, thinking back now, yeah, it's like, huh. Okay, this none of this game makes a damn lick of sense.
No.
But God, it's so much fun.
yeah, it was fun. The levels were procedurally generated. Again, that amazing soundtrack. It was Funkatron jamming. I love that game.
Oh God, such a good game.
Konami, they originally were locked into Nintendo's ecosystem, but they branched out and were able to produce some awesome hits such as Contra Hard Corps. But this one,
No way, Contra Hard Corps was awesome,
yeah,
dude.
it's over there somewhere.
This is Contra 4, right?
That's it. Yeah, you could
Now,
argue.
wasn't this done by an American studio, though? It wasn't done by their typical Japanese studio?
It was in partnership with
Okay.
your actual Konami Japan guys. But these games, even though they feel
Werewolf with a machine gun arm, man. Contra Hard Corps was
yeah, these games were a little different from their Super Nintendo branches, but they were fantastic games. Great music, multi-segmented bosses, big huge things. They felt similar but a little different. They felt like they're their own beast on the Sega Genesis. So Castlevania Bloodlines is one of my favorite Genesis games, and it still holds up to this day. Great music, great bosses, great design. Dracula with the jerk at the end, and same thing with Konami. Just good. Konami did a good job. Another great Konami game was Rocket Knight Adventures. Remember that?
Oh yeah, Rocket Knight. That was a good game.
What about Mighty Number 9?
We should talk about that. We should have a whole episode of Mighty Number 9.
Ouch. So when you're a little kid, the things that you go to are sort of like the video game versions of your animated flicks. But a breakout, and they're usually not that great. They're pretty bad. But I absolutely do love Aladdin, and it's hard as fuck, too.
Aladdin, yes. Aladdin was a great
I think
game.
the Genesis was where all the Disney games were.
Because they had
were
like
so
Lion
much better
King
than
and
the Super Nintendo games. Why is that, Rob?
It was
Like better than their Super Nintendo counterparts, right? Aladdin was on the Super Nintendo, but it wasn't as good as the Genesis one. Little
same
Mermaid
thing with
was the same
Lion
thing.
King.
was it more
Lion
like
King.
processing power?
No, it wasn't the same game.
No,
It
it
was
was
different
it was
games.
different,
So
but
what
was it
So
like just the engine?
So the difference is very interesting. Why you could say that Sega either won or was really close to the 16-bit console wars. The Genesis has a 7.68 megahertz processor, which was considerably faster than the Super Nintendo's 3.58 megahertz processor. So even though the Genesis had a reduced color palette, it only had like 64 simultaneous colors. The Super Nintendo had a maximum of 512, but that wasn't used very often. It had the processing power to boot. That's where you got that phrase, blast processing, for Sonic and things. It could handle more stuff concurrently, which means more frames of animation. So when you play games like Aladdin and everything,
Because it moves.
slick,
Everything's
it moves.
moving. And that's
There's more processing to handle all that. So yeah, it was a technical advantage as far as like the processor was concerned. There was a disadvantage as far as like graphics and music was concerned.
So would you say that Street Fighter was better on the Sega Genesis, like Championship Edition? Is it a better game than Street Fighter 2 Turbo?
Oh, that's
Okay, that's an unfair.
I would say it was better on the Super Nintendo because at some point the programmers
the
had
extra
figured out like, okay, even though we only have 3.58 megahertz to deal with, we can do what we need to do with Street Fighter. So Street Fighter was probably better on the Super Nintendo, but there was a time where it was just it was Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo, and the Genesis got Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, Champion Edition's on the Sega Genesis. This
So
is
much better, right?
Yeah, and then
they
Super
got
Turbo came with
Turbo.
Super Nintendo, and yeah, that all went to heck.
And then, of course, we had the whole Mortal Kombat fiasco where the Super Nintendo got like
sanitized
neutered, sanitized.
Sweat.
version.
Yeah.
Sweat instead of blood, right?
And it wasn't just a sweat in the blood, even though, and I was one of those guys, I fought tooth and nail. Man, Super Nintendo, Mortal Kombat 1 is much better. No, it played slower. It was prettier, but it played slower, and there's no fatalities.
I was going to say, it didn't have fatalities.
It didn't have
the
fatalities.
No.
So the Genesis version, and I worked at Babbage's, America's Computer Software Headquarters.
Nothing but bad bitches in here tonight. Bad bitches only.
I like bad bitches because they like bad bitches too.
At the time, during Mortal Monday, and we sold about 100 billion zillion copies of Mortal Kombat for the
Right.
Genesis, and we sold 7 for the Super Nintendo. And I was one of those guys, man, it's good too. It looks so much better. No, it did not play better. So, yeah,
All right.
Genesis did.
So for my final game, how could I not talk about this wonderful franchise? Because I could talk about the Shining Force franchise, but I'm gonna go with Phantasy Star IV.
Interesting that you chose 4.
Really? It was $150, dude. I had to choose 4. All the other ones were like
You had to get
$79,
money for it.
$60. When this game came out, my God, it was the most expensive game. It was well, what was $129, right?
It was, yeah, I think that's right.
Why was it so expensive?
Well, funny story. Rob, why don't you tell us?
Phantasy Star IV at the time of its release was 24 megabits, which is not Diddly Squad now. Like I said, megabits, not megabytes. It was one of the biggest game cartridges that was produced at the time. In fact, I think since then, the only thing that topped it after a while was like Phantasy Star or Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo. So it was huge, all the stuff that they packed in.
I
And
just
the
remember
story-
the music was
and the
kicking, and the
music-
characters were awesome.
multiple characters, multiple storylines. They went through marriages and deaths and all kinds of stuff. There was so much, like different, like for the cutscenes, there were like little panels and characters and animation. There was so much density to Phantasy Star 4. That's why it cost like $100 and some odd dollars. And there's so many other Genesis games we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about Musha, Metallic Uniframe Super Hybrid Armor, which
We didn't talk about Valleys. I love Valleys.
We
Yeah.
didn't talk about Bart's Nightmare.
Or
no, we're not going to talk about Bartheimer.
Golden
Valleys.
Axe 2.
I'm ready for Bart's
Golden
Nightmare.
Axe 2.
Herzog's Wild, which invented like the genre of like real-time action strategy. Thunder Force, there's so many fantastic shooters. Again, talking about how
Yeah,
the
we should do an
Genesis
episode
process-
on just shooters, so.
We should do a shooters episode. Gyrus. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Rob,
Okay.
where
Sorry.
we at? Where we at? Where we at? Focus.
So,
Stay on target.
staying on target. My favorite game for the Genesis by far is Gunstar Heroes. Now, I don't have the original fruit roll-up because my freaking brother ate my fruit roll-up. I'm still pissed about this, Justin. Ate my fruit.
Wait,
so
what?
this is the one of the best games ever made for the Genesis. It's by a team in Japan called Treasure, and they do amazing games even to this day.
Radiant Silver Gun, Ronald McDonald Kids. Is that what
Don't
it's
make
called?
Ikaruga, shut up. So this is one of the first games.
Heroes.
Yes, Guardian Heroes, and this is one of the first games after they disbanded because there used to be Konami Kids, which is why Contra and some of these games were so good. They did
Because
their
of
own.
these guys, yeah.
And so this game, I have a million stories about Gunstar Heroes where if you look at this, when it came out, you look at this box, you're like, this does not look like fun. This looks stupid, right? So I worked at Beverages and I was like, this is stupid. And I played the game for 30, all it takes is 30 seconds. And anyone who plays this game for 30 seconds, they're hooked, they love it. So many times I'd be like, someone would come to my house, hey, can I borrow a game? You can borrow Gunstar Heroes. I don't want that trash. Okay, play it. Oh, can I have the game? Nope, sorry, you said no. One of the best, hardest, best animation, fantastic music. These Treasure guys like took Genesis hardware to levels where, when I talk about limitations on colors and music, they did not give a crap. They broke the Genesis and made it do things that we never thought we could see. Huge bosses that were made of multi-segmented things, great rockin' soundtrack. And it wasn't just this game. You make fun of Ronald McDonald Treasure Land Adventure, but it's also a fantastic treasure game. It's legit. Dynamite Headdy's another great platform game that these guys put together.
Yep.
Like, so Treasure for me is the reason that the Genesis, like Sonic, Treasure, and like some of these other things we talked about are where it's at. So even to this day, whatever Treasure puts out, I'm generally on board. Astro Boy for the Game Boy, whatever.
I much like the Super Nintendo days, like during its last heydays, had Donkey Kong Country. I remember the Vector Man series coming out on these things, and I was blown away by Vector Man because the graphics were so different for anything on the Sega Genesis. I mean, we were looking at almost, and they also had Toy Story, like this Toy Story that came out towards the later span of its life, the Sega Genesis,
with Donkey Kong Country-ish rendering graphics. Yeah, and Sega also had something called the Sega Technical Institute, where it was one of the first things where developers in the United States and Japan worked together to produce games like Kid Chameleon and the Ooze, some other things like that. But doing Kid Chameleon, so doing technical cool things was what the Genesis pioneered.
Well, and I mean, the Genesis had the Sega Channel, which Nintendo had absolutely nothing like ever.
No, we're not doing it. Cut.
So those are some of our favorite Genesis games, from Treasure to Sega to Konami. Great content. We love it. What are some of the games we may have missed? Let us know in the comments below. So please, like, share, and subscribe from your grave. He's good.
I was waiting for it.
Trying to be still.
Funny story. I was flying back from Dallas. I have a habit of doing that, and it was a lady sitting next to me, and she did that, and I went like that. But luckily, she had her mouth closed, and I'm like, oh my god. So glad I didn't do that.